welcoming Dr. Graham Harding. The unique thing about him is you're going to now listen to somebody with something like 4 decades of experience in this. One of the biggest problems in conservation currently identified in a recent report by the Endangered Wildlife Trust is the transfer of institutional knowledge. And somewhere it goes missing. So we are really privileged to have somebody who's got this amount of experience to share that with everybody who wants to listen. So Graham, thank you so much for your contribution this afternoon, and over to you.
So I'm Graham Harding from Invasive Plant Specialists. Interesting to hear Johan refer to me more or less as an institution. It indicates an age that's linked to that. Just briefly, what do we do? We do everything involved in invasive alien species. We do develop management plans. We do general consulting in invasive alien species management. We train from herbicide applicators right the way up to what South Africa needs is herbicide pest control operators. We do worksite management, how to work in the field, herbicide development trials, something that Kenya is going to need for herbicides in the future, risk assessment, and then auditing of plans as they've been developed. Now, I'm going to talk more on problem plants, but that incorporates invasive alien vegetation. And the question I really ask on this is, why am I saying problem plants? And generally speaking, the problem is not the plant, it's people. We bring them from Australia, South America, North America, wherever, and we have uses for them. I've seen in the Rift Valley in Kenya many years ago where the Cylindropuntia species, Queen of the Night and others have been planted as fences. They make very good corrals to keep the animals in and obviously keep the animals out. And when this was done, no thought was given to what they might do in the future. So we shouldn't really blame the plant. It's our interaction with the plant that causes the problem. And now we put ourselves in a position where we have to manage that plant to get it back to a reasonable situation where we can live with it. So briefly, an invasive alien plant, I know this should be basic to all of us. It's an exotic plant brought in from another region. Because it's brought in, it's got no natural enemies, and those are what you normally use for biocontrol. And if you look at Puntia, we've all seen the cochineal insects, and they were brought in. They're very, very effective. One of the reasons why they work well in the dry areas is that the females can continue to fly and lay their eggs. When you have rain season, the females can't move around. They can't lay their eggs. If the females don't move around, the young females move around, they become sessile, and they suck the plant until they get washed off in the rain. So that becomes a problem in the wet seasons. Bush encroachers, indigenous plants have become a problem. And there we could look at something like castor oil in the eastern parts of Africa. And then ruderal weeds is something that we so often forget. These are plants that are pioneer species that fill a space. Sometimes invasive alien species, sometimes they're not. And they are found very often in many different scenarios, from roadsides, disturbed ground, to sometimes in natural vegetation. I think it was Peter who mentioned getting funding, and we get the funding before we really assess the problem properly. Recently, I've been starting to say that before a plan is drawn, ownership of the problem must be accepted. I've done a lot of work on Prosopis matenge, and you go onto a farm and you say, you need to get rid of it. And the landowner says, but it's not my problem. I use it for firewood. I do this, I do that, I do the next thing with it. Unless we can convince that landowner that something must be done to manage it, while they may still be able to use it, we're not going to solve the problem. So Prosopis is used for firewood, charcoal, fodder, shade, and in parts of Africa, South Africa included, those are sought after attributes to the plant. But its spread has to be managed and has to keep that in check, and that becomes a conflict of interest in trying to do that. Something like Datura, Jimson weed, thornapple, there are numerous different species. There is some confusion between the species. It's small, but it's troublesome. And one of the biggest problems here, you've got these balls of or pods of seeds, and these seeds can lie in the soil for 30 to 40 years. So it's one tiny little plant on the side of my land. It doesn't mean much of a problem, so why should I bother taking it out? But you could next year go from one plant to 10,000 plants, quite simply. So you then have to have a plan to manage that plant so you can carry on using your piece of land, your conservation area, as you want to. And this is just a picture from South Africa. It grows in incredibly arid areas. This is on the Orange River, effectively desert. There's Prosopis velutina in the background and then Datura in the foreground. Easy to control. This landowner on our, not insistent, but he's gone out and he's pulled all of these out before they seed and then he buries them on the farm so they're not a problem. So this topic came up as well. Why do most management plans fail? And putting it simply, there's a lack of acknowledgement of the problem. Why do we need to control invasive species? Why do we need conservation? Understanding the problem. It's only one plant in my garden. It's only one plant on my piece of land. I use it for shade. The fact that wild animals are eating the seeds and taking them further, porcupine, all sorts of antelope, etc., take the seeds all over the place. This has been mentioned as well. Planning and budget. If we ask the question differently, is everybody earning sufficient money? Elon Musk recently became the first trillionaire in the world. What's he aiming for? To make more money. And it's the same with our work. We always need more money to get the job done. One of the biggest problems is the correct implementation. Everybody thinks they know how to control invasive alien species, and that is unfortunately incorrect. We see trees cut down too tall, incorrect herbicides used, wrong time of the year sprayed, all these aspects that result in poor management. And then monitoring the progress. Think of you traveling in a car with your kids, you're going on holiday from point A to point B. What's the first question they'll ask you? Are we there yet? How much further? And if we don't monitor the progress, we don't really know where we're going. So a management plan is a roadmap for your reserve, for the species, for the area, for your piece of land, whatever it might be. And different pieces of land all need different management plans. A management plan will tell you why we are clearing or managing invasive plants. We're not doing it just for the sake of doing it. There has to be a reason. What you need to do. Can we live with the big ones? Must we take the small ones out? Different things for different pieces of land. How are we going to do it? Are we going to bring in helicopters and drones and spray the plants? We're going to leave it to biocontrol? When are we going to do it? What time of the year? Etc., etc. Might influence by grazing animals. It might be influenced by the herbicide label. It might be influenced by a variety of factors. So the management plan is your key starting point, and it's a step-by-step guide to invasive species and encroacher management. It must include methods, costs, and timelines. And then it's a reference tool for measuring the progress of the project. If it's being funded by a funding agency, they would want to see something as well. So now you've got the tool. These are what our steps are going to be, and this is when we can expect to get to the different points. And remember, a management plan is not cast in concrete. You have to be modifying it as you go along. It needs to be specific, measurable, assignable, realistic, and timeline. In other words, a smart plan. What are we going to do? How much and when are we going to do it? And the big thing is who's going to do it? And realistic. Is it achievable? It's very easy to say we're going to clear 1,000 hectares in a week. Not possible. And then when's it going to be started? When's it going to be finished? And what are the timelines in between? The plan must include recommendations. South Africa is fairly well known for its Working for Water program. And they've got a herbicide policy that tells you for different species what herbicides you can use. And it will list all the herbicides on the registration process of South Africa. So many plans say use Working for Water recommendations. I'm an implementer in the field. I need to be told, use chemical cut stump. use chemical foliar, use biological, use mechanical. What methods am I going to use? If I'm going to use herbicides, I must know the name of the herbicide, the rate of application, and how it's applied. And what the above must tell you as well, it doesn't mean that chemical control is the only one that can be done, or biocontrol. These must be combined together along with any other conservation methods that we have in the process. So we're going to put all of these together, and for different parts of the land, as we'll show you just now, we have a mix of control methods. It's a long-term operation. You're not going to finish the project in 1 or 2 years. And this is also a problem with many of the overseas funders. You get a 5-year or 3 or 5-year funding, and the project is not complete by that stage. And then your monitoring comes on after that. So your stages of control: initial control, first time the site is cleared. What are we going to do for initial control? And very often that might just be pull out the seedlings, cut down the big trees, or whatever your plan has been done. You're then going to have follow-up. And now this becomes important when you're doing your budgeting for your control plan, because first time you might do 1 hectare in the first year. Your follow-up, you have to go back to that 1 hectare, and you want to do another hectare. So in year 2, you're clearing 2 hectares. In year 3, you might be clearing 3 hectares. So your budget has to increase as you go along. So your follow-up just is rectifying any errors or any mistakes that happened in the first initial control, and any seedlings that have grown up or been blown in since then. And eventually move into a maintenance phase, that when the plant's in a manageable position, you just keep on at a low level, going in and pulling out or cutting down a few plants. And these should all be seedlings and small plants and low infestations. I have a farmer friend in the Eastern Cape of South Africa. We worked on his farm in the 1980s. You can do the maths, that's 40 plus years ago. He is still doing maintenance 40 plus years later. So your reserves will continually having maintenance. Just have a look at this picture. We've got a piece of land, a hill in the background with a clear ground and trees on the right, and then nice vegetation in the front. And if we just go through the next slide, 2 owners have different approaches that impact outcomes. The piece on the left is overgrazed. The right, that invasive species is removed and as an active rehabilitation program. The foreground is to the farm on the right. So this piece on the right in the front is well managed, got good grazing, and you can have invasive species management and good grazing at the same time. The benefits of a plan is that everybody knows what is needed, from the worker in the field, the project manager, finance manager, and effectively the CEO, finance department, and your funders. The project has clear and defined goals and timelines: when, how, and what. How are we going to treat the plants? We're going to cut them down and treat them, and pull them out, foliar spray them, leave them to insects. Are we going to use biomass? I am still sitting on the hedge on this one. A lot of people say the biomass is going to pay for the cost of clearing. I can confidently say that selling of biomass will not pay for the clearing. It will offset the costs. It may have some environmental positive impacts like biochar and compost, etc., but it will not pay for the costs. So this all needs to be brought into a plan. What are we doing with the area? This is a piece of land, it doesn't matter where, but the orange lines indicate what we call in South Africa N-bells. And you see in the middle there, one is about 64, 65 hectares. So most of them around about 60 hectares. This land was surveyed by the person who did this map, walked it, investigated each piece, identifying the species, the age classes, and the densities. They then developed a spreadsheet like this, where we've got VMA1, Vegetation Management Area 1, they've got acacia seedlings, acacia for Jackson seedlings, and so I just need to move some bits out my way. We say the seedlings is 0.1%, very, very low density. Then there's Penicillium cetaceum, fountain grass that's mature, 0.1%. There's Acacia saligna, lantana in the second one. There's Pinus pinasta in the third one, plus some lantana. And then there's another one, Leptospermum litigata. So Acacia saligna seedlings will be treated one way. Acacia saligna young will be treated a different way. Pinus pinnata will be treated differently as well. Lantana camara will have a different treatment method, and Leptospermum, likewise, as will Pennisetum cetaceum. So each one has a different control method. Depending where they're growing, depending on their size, and this is often dependent on the type of herbicides that are registered. Because I know in Kenya, as in South Africa, you may only use registered herbicides. You can't just go and recommend anything, spray anything that you feel like. Our Department of Forestry, Fisheries, and Environmental Affairs who oversees management plans, and these are all plans presented are supposed to be submitted to them. And they have published guidelines that are very, very similar to what I'm running through today. And they give the guidelines for management plans. What are some of the key challenges with Kenya? I've taken this one more from what I've seen in the Serengeti. Parthenium histophorus, the we call the moila weed here. It's toxic to humans, it needs a rapid response, and it needs chemicals. When I spoke to the people in the Serengeti, I said, but this is being brought in from Arusha by tourists on aircraft. Why don't you clear the airfields where your aircraft are taking off from? The response, it's not our problem. We'll treat it when it's on our property. Surely a plan there should be try and work with somebody to stop the source so it doesn't become a problem on your property. Now you've got aircraft flying all over the Serengeti, Masai Mara, and dropping Parthenium seeds wherever it goes. And we've seen in KwaZulu-Natal what this weed can do, and it is horrific. One I'm very well versed with is Meltuma or Prosopis matenge. It coppices. There's rumors that some of the species root sucker. I haven't seen that in South Africa. And the biggest problem, it's a conflict of interest species. It has got some good biocontrol agents coming up at the moment. So does Parthenium. And people are going to say, let biocontrol agents do it. We have to bring in all the different control methods on both these bad species to manage the problem correctly. Just a little basics, and I'll be talking, or David or I will be talking on the 3rd on herbicides in more detail, but they're an integral part of invasive alien plant program. And we need to understand certain aspects of the product. How does it work? How does it kill the plant? I'm not going to go into that now. It's toxicity to the operator. Is the operator going to die? We've all heard of different chemicals. There's big court cases about toxicity. If we handle them properly, we can work safely with them, and it's not going to cause a problem. One of the big problems in the Masai Mara is the question comes up, are they toxic to animals? These have been tested, and if the animal eats a normal amount of the plant and it has been sprayed with herbicide, it is not going to kill the animal. Toxicity to non-target and toxicity to target and non-target plants. A lot of the herbicides, if you're in on the 3rd, we'll be talking about toxicity to the plant and to non-target plants. And we have to understand the herbicides, how we can use them correctly to minimize damage to other animals and to other plants. Environmental fate. What happens to the herbicide once it is released from the plant after it's been sprayed? Where does it go to? This has all been researched internationally and normally locally as well. So we know what the herbicide is going to do in the soil. And then the next thing that has to be done seriously is read the label. We can't push that enough. But in the management plan, cannot just say read the label and apply the herbicide. If there are aspects in the herbicide label that are tricky to understand, the management plan must state, do this and do that according to what the label tells them to do. This is just a series of photographs going from left to right. The left, the plant, if you look very carefully, you might not see it on the screen, but you can see there's little faint dots on it, on the leaves. That support Jackson was sprayed as part of our BCO training program. And then Later stage, we've got the end of the plants. You can see the leaves starting to curl. This is a typical impact of a uh, hormone inhibitor herbicide that causes this curling in the leaves, and then they eventually dry out and die. And we can do this, kill the plant very specifically without causing damage to anything else, as we see here, where we've killed pine trees in amongst other pine trees. Yes, this was part of an experiment. We're seeing if the herbicide killed the pines, but we've taken Pinus spinaster, treated them, and we haven't damaged anything else in the surroundings. So herbicides can be very target specific as well. So just trying to estimate what the current status is. I've done a bit of research before this. Now, there's a lot of work being done by CABI, listing invasive alien species in your area. And I think the prioritized areas have been identified. So the next step would be outcomes-based approach to plant control. What do we want, and when do we want it, and where do we want it? Sit and do that work first. Budget, what have we got? And we've heard already, we don't have enough budget. Everybody has that problem. What sort of resources are available? People, they need to be trained. Equipment needs to be bought. Downstream use of biomass. Is there an offtake for the biomass from the plants? All needs to be thought about and put into place. And Africa is a big user of charcoal. So why not use the woody species for charcoal production if possible? We need a proper plan before commencing any control projects. We see this on our farmers in South Africa where people rush in, they grab an axe and they go and cut trees down or chainsaw and cut trees down and apply herbicide. And there's no thought to what's going to have to be done next month, next year. And suddenly there's no budget for next year. So then everything gets left and it goes back to where we started. Invasive species aren't new. There's a lot of existing knowledge and skills available, both nationally in Kenya and internationally on the African continent. We need to make use of this and share our skills amongst each other. Don't rely on one method. Use whatever you can to solve the problem. Make sure everyone involved knows their role. And this comes back to what Peter said. Speak to the local community, speak to the landowners. What do they want? Where do they fit into it? Don't just come in and bulldoze across it, and let them know what the outcome of the program is likely to be. Thanks, everybody. And that is my contact details, which I think have been shared already.
I see there is a question in the chat at the moment, and it's really a good question in the context of your contribution now, really highlighting all the time the holistic approach and integrated approach. So he's asking, how do you evaluate the trade-offs between ecosystem restoration, biodiversity conservation, and the livelihood priorities of indigenous and pastoralist communities? That's a tough one.
I wish I could say pass.
You're on the chair.
There is no one easy answer. We get people phoning, sorry, no, see, it's Muli asking the question. We get people phoning up and saying, how do I control such and such? And they get very cross and they think we're only trying to do it for money. The person needs to see the situation. To try and say you can manage it because in a certain area between the ecosystem, the biodiversity, and the indigenous people, the pastoralists, it depends on the species, depends on the conservation area, depends on the people as well. If the people are willing to work and work with it, and I got seen some very good examples coming out of the Grumeti Reserve in Serengeti, where they're tying the communities very strongly in with the reserve, and they then see the benefit. But the problem they then have is the grass in the reserve is growing so well, the animals want to go and graze there. So there's a challenge the whole time. But sorry, Murray, there is no one answer. Depends on the situation.
Thank you, Graham. Okay, another excellent question from Stuart. What is the state of play in terms of our understanding of remote sensing generated spectrum signatures of key problem plant species? How can we use this understanding to maximize the impact of future management interventions?
Stuart, thank you. There's a lot of work being done in South Africa, as I'm sure in other parts of the continent as well. using various satellites, drones, aircraft, whatever. In our work, we just use a drone to give us a fairly close-up image from above. There's been work in South Africa mapping prosopis and other invasives from satellites, with a lot of spectral imagery being tested to see what we can pick up. It is very, very useful. The challenge, though, is it gives you the area, not the details. And you very often need to go back and check the details. What's underneath that canopy? How dense is it before you can do your full-on management plan? It's a starting point, and we're developing that technology very, very rapidly.
Okay, so there's no replacement yet for boots on the ground.
I'd like to say,
Okay.
fortunately not.